Good afternoon. You are listening to WWPT 90.3 FM here, and today in the Air Studio we have a very special guest in Greg Kraut. And today, I believe it will be the first time ever on WWPT we've had a state office runner coming into our studio, and I'd like to thank you for coming and doing that. We are very lucky to have you. And we have Zach Iannacone, Will Rosenthal, and Timmy Luciano in the Air Studio to ask him some questions, and I will be handing it over to those guys. There you are.
Well, thank you for being here, first off. And our first question for you is, you obviously have a lot of goals to achieve, but what is the first thing you would do when you get into office?
First of all, it's great to be here. I always wanted to be in one of these settings, but I envisioned myself with a guitar in my hand or something, and being a famous celebrity. Look, there are a lot of things we have to do. There are things that we're going to have to vote on immediately. One of the votes that I'm going to do is to vote against kicking the can down the road for sustaining the pension and bringing it out to the out years, which is going to come on the table somewhere come February 1st. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to introduce the following bills. Number one is to reduce state income tax by an X percentage over a couple of years. The second one is to eliminate the estate, gift, Social Security, and pension tax. We're the only state that has all four. We don't make that much money from it, and it's really leading to a lot of our seniors fleeing. And leading to a higher cost of living, and we need to be competitive our state. The third thing is I want to expedite the hearings to eliminate up to about $1 billion of excess spending without adversely affecting social problems. The auditors, if you would have listened to the auditors and seen their reports, there's about 7 or 8 different reports that shows even things like benefits to dead people, about $40 million for that. I mean, you just can't believe that some of the stuff that I found. Also, we need to tackle pensions too. Right. And so we got to figure out ways to bring in non-taxpayer revenue back into the government. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with issuing debt or selling some of our best assets like our lottery or our beaches, et cetera. Also, we need to put in place a aggressive economic development plan to recruit and retain high-paying jobs. Which we don't have now, and other states do, like Florida and Virginia, et cetera. And one of the things I've found is when I put together my plan my economic plan, which was as a direct result because I got so fed up with reading every day that we're last in almost every business poll, and we don't have money to fund X, Y, and Z. And I moved here thinking that our state was doing a better job. And when I found out, I ripped through the revenue and the expenses and what other states were doing, that really wasn't the case. And so at the end of the day, we need to modernize and optimize a lot of our prehistoric government revenue streams. And a lot of that is just even things as small as lottery. We're the only state in our area that doesn't take a credit card for a lottery. Right, it's just a fact. And so things like that you could do to bring in some non-taxpayer revenue pretty quickly, as I'm going to look to do. Also, we need to prioritize the funding that goes directly to education and goes directly to transportation. We're going to make sure that happens because the lifeblood of our community is the commute and our schools. And I have 2 little kids in the schools here. I got to make sure that we have what all those employers want, why people also come here, which is efficient transportation systems and unbelievable education.
Thank you very much. Very good answer. And I believe Will has the next question for you, kind of a little segue from that.
So, what are your thoughts on medical marijuana dispensary coming into Westport? Because supposedly this will raise a lot of tax money, and that revenue will go to the government, and that will help with all the government spending and all that. So how do you feel about it?
Thank you. That's been a topic of conversation over the last year in Westport. I am for medical marijuana. I'm for it being put in the right place, the right size, the right hours of operation. I've researched other states, read their ordinances, and I saw some of the things that we've done and some of the things we haven't done properly. I don't think we need 2. I think we need 1 small scope and location it'll allow us to not be front and center with it. Everybody thinks though, but I'm not for recreational marijuana right now. Everybody thinks it makes a lot of money. I've actually done my research, and quite frankly, it would cost Westport money. Number one is most of the towns that get this revenue only see between 3% and 5%. In some states, 0%. Like New Jersey it may happen in New Jersey from the state for this revenue. And I'll give you an example. In Colorado, they made $200 million in fees. They have twice as big of a population as we have. If you extrapolate that out, that means we would make about $140 million, but they were first movers, right? They tax 15% on the cultivation level and 15% on the storefront, but they also had a tremendous amount of demand because they had marijuana tourism, right? So if you relate that to Connecticut, right, you figure you take that down a half, so that's about $70 million worth of money. Then you split that again because you figure the demand is going to be half because now Massachusetts has it, right? Massachusetts only taxed 10%. So if Colorado taxes 30%, Massachusetts taxes 10%, figure we're going to tax 10% as well. That's only about $25 million into the state. So we look at what is that percentage to Westport. It's a very tiny amount. When I've spoken to the police chief about this, he thinks it's going to cost us much more than the money we're going to get back from the government. So if it's purely an economic thing, people are misinformed, right? Because I've done my research on it. But I do think people need medical marijuana. I do think it has a place in Westport. I don't think it's the gravy train that everybody thinks it's going to be.
In terms of education, how will you get funding from the state back in order to increase the budget for things like school resource officers?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how much revenue the state brings in, right? And so, it's just revenue minus expenses. And so if we keep on having our expenses that are moving up, our revenue staying stagnant, and we have a loss of people, high net worth people, loss of major companies, and we still have a very high cost of living, it's very hard to get everything that you want for every program. I will tell you, this is a top priority for me, and I will do everything I can to make it fair for Westporters. We've given $2 billion in state income tax and sales tax over the last 5 years. We've gotten back less than 1%. Okay, that's a significant amount of money. Everybody talks about tolls, but tolls will have more money. Let me tell you something. They put casinos in our state specifically that money was supposed to go to our towns and to our schools, and it didn't. Okay, so in the last 5 years, they've cut our money for our casinos. They're supposed to go to our towns. They've cut our payment in lieu of tax money, which is the money that the state's rent, basically the state's rent that they pay to the local towns, and they cut our education cost sharing program. Meanwhile, we've given a significant amount of money back to the state, which I don't think is fair. And so I'm going to fight every single day to make sure we get enough money we can for security, for special needs children, which is very important. And the way they handle special needs in Connecticut and how they relate it to the town, it's way too much of a burden for us. Just the way it's calculated. So at the end of the day, if we don't have the top education, we don't have money going directly into education, going directly into transportation, we're going to be falling very quickly down to the wayside, because that's why people come to Westport. They come to Westport for the great education, and that's what keeps our property values up high as well.
All right, thank you very much. And another question that I have is General Electric. That was one of the state's largest company, I believe, and they have left. What will you do in the future to ensure that another company like that doesn't leave, or that more come back to Connecticut?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, just to clarify, GE still has some operations in Stamford through GE Capital. We must do what we can to have a proactive way to retain and to recruit high growth businesses. That's just not giving them incentive after incentive. It's having a stable government. It's having access to knowledge workers. It's having a tax basis which is growing, which I think it means, which my opponent doesn't, having lower taxes. And so by having lower taxes, in fact, General Electric said, they put out a press release saying, if you raise these taxes on us, this was a few years ago, we are going to move out of the state. There's a press release that says it. My opponent says that, it's only because they wanted access to knowledge workers and Boston bought our company. No, what really happened was it was a combination of everything. And quite frankly, Massachusetts has brought down their tax structure. Their GDP has gone up. Our GDP has gone down by almost 9% since 2000, right? Massachusetts has gone up 16%. We're the only state that hasn't recovered from the recession. We're the only state that have had negative growth. We've lost 10,000 high growth employees, meaning high income employees, meaning that if we're bringing employees that are making $45,000 a year, it costs us about $75,000 per household. So we're losing money on some of those people coming in. Where we were successful was when we had 30,000 more high-paying jobs, making $175,000 a year. So you take this 175, you minus it by the 75. That $100,000 delta is really the delta you need for your profit for the state. And so that's why firms like Bridgewater actually are in the state, because the CEOs live in Greenwich. So if you start having, which scares the shit out of me, pardon my French, you start having high net worth individuals leaving the state, right? We've had a $6 billion wealth migration out of the state, $6 billion, from $6 billion to $12 billion, right? We've had two of the largest state income taxes over the last 8 years. Our Connecticut competitiveness ranking went from 21% to 43%. And then you look at the trains, the on-time percentage has gone from 96% down to 85%. You put everything together, right? And you're like, something has to change. And we don't have time to wait 20 years, 30 years, 40 years for the change. And we don't have to. That's just an excuse. So listen, I'm a very proactive person. I've built companies. I work with both sides. I want to get stuff done. And that's why I'm doing this.
So what would be your first step in lowering taxes?
The first step of lowering taxes was to introduce a bill to reduce the state income tax, number one. The second would be to introduce a bill to eliminate the estate, the gift, the pension, and the Social Security tax immediately, right? That would send a sign to seniors. That would send a sign to businesses. That would send a sign to high net worth individuals that are thinking about potentially leaving. Everybody I speak to is thinking about leaving. And why is that? Because of all those things that I mentioned. Again, we are a suburb of New York City. We need to have efficient transportation. We need to have great education. But how do you get that? You get that with money, right? You need to fix these things. You need to constantly fund our schools. We don't have that revenue. So everything comes from the revenue side, from the supply side.
So I know last period you had a debate with Jonathan Steinberg. How do you think that went?
I think it went fine. I think the most important thing is that the students heard some pretty differences in ways about doing things and working with both sides. And we don't have a choice right now. We have to work with both sides. I've broken with my party on some issues. I obviously don't agree with the Democrats on the financial stuff. So I'm very much right down the middle, and I think the students heard that. I think the students, at the end of the day, students want to make sure that they're protected, both with gun reform. They want to make sure that they have jobs at the end of the day. They want to make sure that their rights are protected. Right? And however I can do to make sure that our rights are protected and at the same time drive business and drive revenue, I'm going to do that. I'm not a full-time politician. I have a business. I have 2 little kids. I want to do this. I want to help.
And then another question that I think a lot of students have specifically is gun reform. Especially we had a couple incidents here, and of course there's tons around the nation.
Right.
What's your stance on that?
Well, I think we need to have better background checks. I think we need to have longer waiting periods before people can buy a gun. I think you have to look at, what basically, it's not just having SROs at schools. It's about having mental health professionals, social workers as well. But it's everything. It's everything combined. It's everything we're seeing in society right now. But the most important thing is protecting our children. The average waiting time is between 5 and 8 minutes between a shooter that comes to the school and then a police officer responding. So I think you do need to have SROs. I think it's super important to have somebody there protecting us and protecting our children. I also think it's super important to look at the mental health aspect of this stuff as well. And so you look at both things, and I think it's important that you have awareness of what's in your backyard. I mean, we have the largest gun company, Sturm Ruger, that sells more semi-automatic rifles than any other company in our backyard in Fairfield, right? And I think you also need to figure out where that money comes from. If you really want gun reform, then what you want to do is you want to see where the money's coming in from, which is the pension funds funding the asset management funds, the asset management funds funding the firms like Sturm Ruger, right? And the other side, you want to see where they're being sold out of, which is the Walmarts, the Dick's Sporting Goods. But at the same time, look, there are 7,000 guns in our town. Now, they're not 7,000 people. There's a certain amount of households, right? So you figure probably like 8 to 1 or so. So you have a small percentage that owns a lot of the guns, but it's scary times. It's not the same times that it was 15, 20 years ago. But I want to know how you folks feel, right? How the kids feel, because that's the most important thing.
All right, so we only have a few minutes left here. So before we sign off, we want to know if you have any last words.
I think it's fair to say that we are not better off over the last 8 years. I think it's better to say that we've fallen short on all of our financial metrics. I'm tired of hearing with the last in every one of these business polls. I'm tired as a commuter. I'm tired of getting on, being annoyed all the time at how long the train takes. Right? I'm tired of seeing unfunded state mandates affect Westport citizens with traffic and infrastructure issues and affecting the idyllic quality of life of our town. I'm tired of seeing our friends and family members moving out. I'm tired of seeing our property values continue to slide. And I'm tired of the excuses. And I'm all about balance, right? I have friends on my campaign that are Democrats. I have friends that on my campaign that are Republicans. We just want to get stuff done. We want to help out Westport. And that's it. I have no other agenda. I'm not backed by any other party. For that matter, I don't care if you call me a conservative Democrat. I don't care if you call me an independent. I don't care if you call me a moderate Republican. It doesn't matter. I want to get stuff done. It's enough talk, and it's time for some action here.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and doing the debate. We would really like to say thank you and the best of luck in the election. And hopefully we'll have you on after the election happens. We can talk about what happened and the best of luck again. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
You have been listening to WWPT 90.3 FM there. We had Greg Kraut in the studio. Thanks to Zach Iannacone, Will Rosenthal, and Timmy Luciano for the awesome questions. We'll be back on WWPT 90.3 FM.